Okay, so we've already studied Vietnam. I will load that video soon. But one of the things is that he was promising what to do with the Vietnam War. End it. And so a lot of times when he's campaigning for the presidency, he will go around with peace signs because he really wants peace to happen in Vietnam. Really, does he contribute to that? No, we know that he does the most unpopular thing and he takes out our troops, but he will begin bombing campaigns in what nations? Cambodia and Laos. And so really people will criticize him for continuing the war. So on your study guide on Nixon, there was this thing called the Southern Strategy. I want you to tell me what party was the Southerners part of traditionally? Before civil rights, they were a part of what party? Democrats. Once FDR and Truman and LBJ started to take on civil rights, what party did the Southerners form? Dixiecrats. And eventually we know that they will go to what party? Republican. But one of the things that he wants to do is to get those Southerners to the Republican Party. So this is what he calls the Southern Strategy, to get them to come over. Do they want civil rights or do they want to work against civil rights? Okay, do they want Brown to be enforced or do they want it to be reversed? And so to woo those George Wallace people, George Wallace is a guy that's a governor, says segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. He has a consistency in his train of thought. But he's going to be able to get a lot of voters in 68 with that. And Nixon realized, if I'm going to win in 72, I need to get these guys on the Republican side. So what he's going to do is oppose extension of the Voting Rights Act. Remember, that's what got rid of the literacy test, and it brought in those federal registrars. He's going to keep the literacy test as illegal, but he's going to remove those registrars. So what's going to happen to the amount of African Americans registered to vote? It's going to go down. The other thing is you have to understand why busing happened. So let me explain. Let's just look at Dallas. Here's Dallas. Okay, where did most people, who was in the city? White people or colored people? Where did white people go? They went to the new housing. Where was the new housing? Up north, right? So if I go north of Dallas, I know it's Richardson. What is this called when all of these people are moving out into this area? White flight. So who stayed in the city? African Americans. So did our schools like Dallas ever desegregate? No, because what they started doing is that people were like, well, I don't want to desegregate, so let's move out to the suburbs. So in these suburban schools, it is entirely what type of student? White, because we know that can African Americans, can Hispanics, or any other colored people move into those areas. They had HOAs. And so what he's going to do is the government is actually going to pass something called busing. That they're going to bus some African American, Hispanic kids to these suburban areas, and they're going to bus in return white kids to the colored schools. How do you think parents are going to feel about that? And they're going to be upset. And in places like Boston, people will open up in riots. They will attack the buses. And so Nixon, in order to woo those people, he's going to oppose busing. So are we going to send any African American kids to the suburbs? Are we going to send any whites down into Dallas? So are we going to have desegregation in the 60s and 70s? No. It takes a long time for desegregation, even though we saw it in Brown versus Board in 1954. We are not doing it in the 50s. We're not doing it in the 60s, and we're not doing it in the 70s. So eventually, by the 80s and the 90s, do you think we're going to see that? Slowly, right? And today, do we see desegregation? Yes, right? But it's because it has taken over 60 years for that to happen. So was civil rights successful immediately? No. But it is people like Nixon who's going to slow the pace of civil rights legislation with the Southern Strategy. So y'all got the Southern Strategy? I know a lot of people had that blank on their study guide. But what you need to put is he opposed the extension of the Voting Rights Act and he opposed busing. So we really didn't desegregate our society. The other thing is Republicans. Do they want big government or small government? Small. They split right after the Great Depression. So we're going to see that he's going to distribute more of the federal power back to the states. He's give them financial freedom to do whatever they please with government money. And also, they can spend it as they see fit, and this is called revenue sharing. Is he keeping our federal government small? Yes, because who is he giving the power to? The states. Okay, other things, and this was one of the questions on your study guide. It asked for the 4 new programs that he does. One of them is food stamps. Is this continuing LBJ's war on poverty? Yes, so he's being a little bit liberal. He's expanding Medicare. He's giving aid to families with dependent children. I don't know if y'all know what that means, aid to families with dependent children. These are people who have physical handicaps, that they cannot go out and get a typical job. So that he's expanding their livelihood by providing money to them. And he also expands Social Security. So is he going to be well liked by helping out? Yes. He's still middle of the spectrum. The next thing I have here, so did y'all catch that where it was on page 3 of your study guide? It asked for the 4 programs. Yes? Okay. What we're going to look at is the Philadelphia Plan. The Philadelphia Plan is something that is going to be very controversial. It's going to require anybody who has a government contract that they have to have affirmative action. So let's just, for example, Donald Trump builds the wall today. And he wants to use the steel plant here. And if they were to hire the steel plant, and let's just say that they have 100 employees. And of the population, 100 employees are white. Do they have affirmative action there? If all of them are white. No, so according to the government, affirmative action means hiring according to the people and the amount of the population. So Waxahachie is about 50% white. We're about 25% Hispanic and 25% black. So this steel company here, what do they have to do to get this contract? Can they have 100 white people still working there? So what should they have? Their workforce should reflect the population. So how many white people should they have? How many black people should they have? How many Hispanic people should they have? Okay, so now this is equaling out the job opportunities. And this is what affirmative action is. It is specifically looking at hiring specific groups, also looking for people who had government contracts, they had to adhere to this, and eventually colleges have to do this. That they have to make special provisions to make sure that those people are represented. Who's going to get upset about this? They're getting in, right? Were they getting in now? Why are white people going to be upset? Look at this right here. This was before. This steel company was hiring how many people? 100 white people. And then when I go over here with affirmative action, they had to let go 50 white people to make room for who? Blacks and Hispanics. Is this going to cause tension? And this is why the 60s and 70s, we're going to see tension build between the races because of the Philadelphia Plan, which created affirmative action. Eventually, y'all know this builds into the case that y'all seen on your study guide about Alan Bach. Alan Bach is trying to get into the UC Medical School Davis. Is he let in? He applies 4 times for medical school. And he realizes my scores are good. I was in the war. Why am I not getting in? And then he starts to equate it to what? Who's getting in? Hispanics and blacks and women. So he's going to sue to the Supreme Court. And did the Supreme Court said that his rights were being violated? What amendment do you think they would say that he was not being treated equally? 14th. And they used that amendment saying, look, he is being discriminated. And what is ordered for Alan Bach? That he gets into UC Medical School. And what do you think is going to happen to affirmative action? Can we use it anymore? No. Affirmative action will go away. And what that means is that they can't just hold a specific spot for a minority, right? But can they look at bringing minorities into school? But can they save them a spot? No. And so all of the progress that's been trying to be made for the civil rights movement, has it just gone wayward with the Bakke case? Yes. Okay, so the next thing, he refuses to provide funding for HUD. I don't know if y'all know what HUD is. It's a housing urban development that makes the projects. Have you ever heard of the projects?
Yeah.
Okay. He refuses funding for them, and he abolishes the Office of Economic Opportunity. Remember, I was talking about this. It was trying to help the people in poverty find jobs. Okay. So is he fully conservative? No, he's in the middle of the road. Okay. To understand Watergate, we also have to understand who his vice president is. His vice president is Spiro Agnew. He represents a group of people called the silent majority. And I want you to think about in the 60s, there was two different types of people who were protesting. There was people who were protesting against the war. What do you think? Are they hawks or doves? Doves. And there were people who were for the war. What do you think they were, hawks or doves? Hawks. He's going to represent the hawks. He says that these are people who wanted to be involved in the Vietnam War. These are people who are upset with the crazy liberalism of the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement. He is a conservative, and he has a group of followers called the silent majority. They're not getting a voice because all the protesters are overshadowing them. Because of the hawks, we're going to see that they want to honor the people in the Vietnam War for their war effort, because a lot of them will protest that I could go to war but I cannot vote. And so this is why the 26th Amendment will come out that will lower the voting age from 21 to 18. So how many of you are going to be 18 next year? How many of y'all are going to be able to vote in the next presidential election? And that is because of the Vietnam War. Okay, so yay, we get a vote, right? We're going to do our civic duty. Okay, along with jury duty after that, right? Y'all know you registered to vote, and once you register to vote, you could possibly be able to serve on a jury. No, y'all don't want to serve on a jury?
I mean, I know what was to get out of it.
Okay, just say kill them all, right? Okay, so that's one way to get out of it. Okay, I should not be recording this, okay, for those who tune in. Okay, let me go down to this new court, which y'all just read about today. Y'all had two cases, Tinker versus Des Moines and Roe versus Wade. We're going to see this is the new court called the Burger Court. Ha ha ha, Burger. Nobody's laughing at his name. Warren Burger, not to be confused with Earl Warren. He's more conservative, but people start to question his conservatism with the case Roe versus Wade. Was Roe versus Wade conservative? No, many people look at Roe versus Wade as being very liberal. And you all know from the reading, where did Roe come from? What city? Right here in Dallas, right? She was suing because in the state of Texas, did they allow abortions? No. And so she was suing because most times in the 60s and 70s, if someone wanted to get an abortion, they had to go to Mexico. Or they would get a backroom operation. And often the woman's life was put in danger. And so she could not get an abortion, so she's going to sue the DA, Wade, in Dallas. And they don't allow it, and it goes up to the highest court of the land. And the highest court of the land says what is now legal in America. Abortion. And we know that this is something that has come under debate with the new election, right, process of the Kavanaugh. Remember when they were asking Kavanaugh of what was his stance on abortion? And many people think that Roe versus Wade within our time period, because the court has become more conservative, will be overturned. We don't know, but we'll find out really soon, because there's some Texas cases where in Texas, what do you think Texas is? Are they liberal? Are they conservative when it comes to it? There's only 5 places within the state of Texas you can get a legal abortion, and they're all at hospitals. If you go to New York, New York allows you up into the 8th month to abort. Okay, so what do we say about New York? Is it liberal or conservative? Liberal. And so it's all of these different interpretations of what to do with Roe versus Wade, that it may go before the court. And because Kavanaugh is very conservative, we know that they could overturn a case. Can the Supreme Court overturn cases? I want you to think of Brown. What did Brown overturn? Plessy versus Ferguson. So can Roe be overturned? Yes. Okay. We'll see that within our lifetime. Okay. Another thing we're going to look at is what is going on in our environment. We are noticing that there's not much regulation and there's a lot of pollution going on. We are seeing that Rachel Carson is going to write a book about DDT. I don't know if y'all know what DDT is, but it's a pesticide. And usually you put pesticides on what? Plants, so you can keep what away from it? The bugs, the critters. And she's going to realize that DDT leads to cancer. And we're in the precursor of cancer development. At this time, we're not developing cancer, but cancer research. Rachel Carson will eventually die from cancer. She will write this book about what is being put in our plants. And this will start the organic movement. Do y'all know the organic movement?
Yes.
Okay. Also, EPA is created saying that we need to watch out on our ozone because what is happening to our ozone layer? It's dying out. We're using aerosols like crazy for the hairspray. And they're realizing all of this is having repercussions in our environment. And this is going to lead to things like yesterday, Earth Day. I remember that? It was question 2. We hadn't gotten there, but now we're there, Earth Day. Okay. Any of y'all were extra eco-friendly? No one?
Yeah.
No one? Yeah. You went out to the woods and became one with yourself, okay? But Earth Day is like HEB's doing a challenge, like with the schools. Did y'all hear about that? That if the school that saves the most plastic bags is going to get $150, and they're doing the challenges amongst the elementary. Anybody walk to school yesterday to be eco-friendly? No, we're too far away. There's a highway. Okay, but on Earth Day, we just need to learn how to teleport so we can be eco-friendly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but Earth Day, we're supposed to watch out about our carbon footprint. Apparently, we cannot, as high school students, be very, because we all drive, right? Anybody carpool yesterday? Okay, no, okay. Alright, so let's look at other ways we could be eco-friendly with the Clean Air Act that comes out. And have you ever seen, like, if you ever drive into Dallas, you know how they have those big screens and they're like, today is a carbon emission day, beware, no, ozone wear days, no, we don't pay attention to that in Waxahachie. Okay, they're on your weather app. I didn't know that they were on your weather app. Okay, the other thing that comes out at this time is the Endangered Species Act. We start to realize that there's a specific group of animals that are going away, and one that we're very concerned about is the eagle. Okay, and so do y'all know, have y'all ever seen the Eagle Cam? They're watching about the eagles being born, and okay, so we started Endangered Species Act at this time, and even within Texas, we're looking at certain animals that have been exterminated. Okay, how many of you are in CTE classes and are OSHA certified? Okay, OSHA comes out at this time because they realize that a lot of people are going into these working places and they're not wearing safety hats. They're not wearing safety goggles. There's not the safety on the blades. And so OSHA comes out and they start putting regulations on businesses. So what's going to happen because of all of these regulations? Are items going to become cheaper or more expensive? More expensive because of OSHA regulations. Because of this, along with the war, we are going to have a period of stagflation, which is high unemployment and high inflation. A lot of it stemmed from the guns, Vietnam, and the butter, the Great Society. Which one's going to get more money? Vietnam or the Great Society?
Great Society.
Vietnam. We put more bombs. It was 118 billion, right? On the study guide, what we spent in Vietnam. That is equivalent to 4 times more bombs dropped on Vietnam than on World War II. Did we spend a lot on that? And so our butter, the spending on Great Society, do we have enough money to do that? No, so it's going to be very little. So what we're going to see are government deficit spend. So what does that mean? Did they have the money or they borrowed the money? They borrowed it, and so this is going to lead to, you know, we're like in $22 trillion of debt today. Okay. Well, there is a way we'll look at it, and when we get to taxation and economics, when you look at macroeconomics, our government needs to start taxing, which they haven't, because no politician is going to be reelected saying, I'm going to raise your taxes, right? Okay. no one would get elected. So that's why it's like on the debt clock today, if you look, it's about $65,000 per each person in the United States living that had to pay $65,000. You, your mom, your pa, your brother, your sister, each one of them $65,000. If everybody paid that to the government would be out of debt.
How would you get that money?
I don't know. We'll look at the debt clock and be depressed later. Okay? Next thing that's going to lead to problems is that the U.S. has backed people in Middle Eastern countries that allowed for them to come in to their oil industries. Because when the British get out of World War II, they also get out of India. They also get out of Iran. They also get out of Iraq. They also get out of Saudi Arabia. And when they get out, the U.S. comes in. Remember the Eisenhower Doctrine that we needed to protect these places in the Middle East from Soviet aggression? And we will back people in there that allow the Americans to take over those industries, but do they reinvest in those countries? All those oil profits come back to America, and this is what's going to lead to a revolution in people trying to get control and throw the U.S. out. And eventually, when they get control of their oil, they're going to start restricting it to the U.S. And the U.S. is not going to get any oil, so what's going to happen to the price? Gasoline will go up 400%. So just imagine we paying like $2 right now. We'd be paying about $8. Okay, most of us would be Earth Daying it, right? Walking it to school. Okay, riding your bike, eco-friendly. Okay, and so we're seeing all of these things coupled together is going to cause stagflation. Wages are going to go up because prices are going up, right? People are asking the government to put price controls, because just imagine, we think just gasoline going up in price, but does that affect your bread? Does that affect the milk? That affects all of your food, and if food goes up in price, what happens to your purchasing power? It goes down, and so then you start asking your boss for more money, right? And so this is called, something in economics is called the wage price spiral. As prices go up, what do you demand with your wage? It goes up, but now you have more money, so what happens to prices? They go up. And this is something you'll discuss next year in macroeconomics. So now our economy is dealing a blow, and then OPEC forms, which is the oil petroleum producing countries. The U.S., we used to be the #1 producer of oil, but what has happened to all of our oil? We've used it, and so now we're at the mercy of these oil petroleum producing countries, which most of them are in the Middle East. And do we have good relations with them? No, and Venezuela and Colombia, who are producing it. And they basically are going to create a cartel, which is kind of a monopoly. What they're going to do is they all form together to create a monopoly. They're going to limit the amount of oil that can be produced. So what does that do with price if they limit it? Price is going to go up. They also put standards on the oil. And they could put embargoes on nations that are not adhering to the policies they want. And so because the U.S. will back the Shah, won't back the Shah, remember we're going to see that in the Iranian hostage crisis, the U.S. is going to face an oil embargo. And so we're going to see they will cut off the supply of oil to us, so prices will go what? Up. And what will happen is the U.S. is going to have to come in and start rationing gas, and everybody on their car is going to get a sticker. And it's going to tell you a day of the week you have to go to the gas station. So if it said Tuesday, that this class had to get gas on Tuesday, are we going to wait till 5 o'clock today to get gas? No. What would happen? Would we even be here in class today? Where would we be at this moment? At the gas station, because we want to get our gas. We would all take a sub day, an absence day, because if we don't go get gas, are we going to get gas Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? No. The U.S. is voluntary. It's not going to voluntarily. It's going to mandatorily ration gas. So here's this guy. He's looking at the gas rationing, right? And look at what has happened at this station. There is no gas. So do you want to wait late in the evening to get gas? So what's going to happen if everybody's in the morning at the gas station? What's up with that line? It's long. And so Americans start realizing, are American cars the best type of car to have? No. Our American cars at this time, if we look at Ford, if we look at Dodge, if we look at Ram, they're getting 10 miles per gallon. You turn your car off, it's still guzzling gas. Okay, so do we want to buy American anymore? We're going to start buying Japanese cars because remember after World War II, we took our technology there and revitalized their industry. So now all of a sudden, we're buying foreign cars, and what's happening to the city of Detroit? They're declining economically because Detroit is where most of our cars are coming out of. And so now people are losing jobs. So what's happening to unemployment? It's going up, but prices are going up, right? Usually in economics, prices go up, unemployment goes down. Prices go down, unemployment goes up. We never see it go in the same direction. So does the U.S. even have a way to solve this issue? No. And so for the next 10 years, we will suffer up until this guy named Ronald Reagan that will introduce supply side economics, which is called Reaganomics, which we'll eventually get to the end of this week. Okay, we're going to look at other groups of people that are going to start challenging their civil rights. We've seen African Americans are taking the forefront. We're going to see women come in. We're going to see Hispanics. We're going to see Native Americans. We're going to see the openly gay Pink Panthers come up. And we're going to see that they're going to use the same tools. One of the things that the Hispanics, do y'all remember when we asked Mexicans to come over into the United States? When was that? World War II. Do y'all remember the name of the program? Bracero. We're asking them come over because what has happened to all of our soldiers? Gone to war, and so we see African Americans, they go into the industry, right? Women go into the industry. And now we have asked Mexican Americans to stay in the fields. And one of the things that's happening is not only Mexican Americans, but we have Filipinos. We have people from Latin America, Central America that have come up here to take the field work. And you have to understand their working conditions. We need to spray pesticides, right? We just learned from Rachel Carson. When are they going to spray the pesticides? At night or during the daytime? Why would they do it during the daytime?
So you can see.
You could see where it's going, but who's on the ground during the daytime? And all these farm workers are getting sprayed what on them? Is pesticides good for you? No. Y'all realize y'all wash your fruits and stuff like that. These people, if you ever watch them when they're picking up fruit, they have long sleeve shirts. They have things that cover up their neck. They have a hat on. They have something over their mouth, right? They have everything that's covering them and even gloves. Because what do they don't want to get exposure to? But do you think they're still going to get exposure? And so this is going to lead to a lot of them getting sick. Women who are pregnant, they're going to have babies that will be deformed, that will be slow in growth. So they're protesting their working conditions. Don't spray on the fields when they're working. But does that cost the business money? Yes. Okay. They want better pay. At this time, they're probably getting 10 cents per every barrel of something that they're bringing in. Recently, Taco Bell 7 years ago was getting trouble with what they were paying their migrant workers for tomatoes. They were paying them about 30 cents per crate. Okay, so we're looking at not only is it working conditions, it is pay, right? And also, these people, do they stay in one place? So right now, if we look at migrant workers, let's just take them how they are in the United States. Right now, migrant workers are in the state of Texas harvesting 2 crops, strawberries and watermelon. Strawberries and watermelon season will be over by June. So where do you think they go next? Okay, they go to California to pick cherries. After they're done in California, midsummer, they go up to Idaho to pick what? Potatoes. Eventually, after that, they will wind up in around September, August in Iowa, Kansas to pick corn. Right? And then they go to Maine to pick apples. So, is it just the parents doing this? It's also their what? Kids. So what is happening to their education? They're going in and out of school, but do you really think they're in schools? Momentarily, because they're at the fields. So what they're wanting to do is improve their working conditions, improve their pay. And what they're going to do is they're going to take a boycott. Have we seen this in history? The boycott hurts who? Merchants, and the merchants go to who? The government, and the government probably comes out with regulations, right? And this is why they're going to boycott the thing that uses the most pesticides, which is grapes. Most of our grapes are made in California. And we're going to see this grape boycott is going to take not only the Hispanic community, but I want you to look at this. Are other people going to rise up? Just like we saw in the civil rights movement, we're going to see that they will rise up, and this will force the California grape growers to increase pay. And so we saw Cesar Chavez is going to lead it. Another person who was helping with the United Farm Workers her name was Dolores Huerta. And these two people are going to lead the movement. Eventually he will go on a hunger strike. Okay? Bobby Kennedy will come, I don't know what that was. Okay. Bobby Kennedy will come out during his hunger strike. And once they deal with the grapes, then they're going to take on other fruits and vegetables. So are they using the same techniques that we've seen in the civil rights movement with African Americans? Our next group that we're going to look at is American Indians. And we've been tracing their history, right? They originally had title to the land. If you have a contract, could that contract be voided?
No.
No, unless you what? Agree to it, right? And so has the government time after time taken their land that they had title to? Do y'all remember the president that was the biggest person who violated their contract rights? Andrew Jackson. Remember gold was found on their land? And then he removes them to Oklahoma, right? All of the West is theirs. Did they get to keep all of that area? No, because we wanted to build a railroad. And so then we removed them off their land, right? And what has happened to their land mass that they used to have? It's shrunk. And this is going to lead to a movement called the American Indian Movement. And their lead person will be Russell Means. And he's going to use the same things. But what he's going to use is a sit-in. I don't know if y'all know what sit-ins are, but they used to do this in factories where they would just sit down. And can they use the appliances there? Appliances, factory machines. Factory machines. And so they're going to take over two places. One of them is Alcatraz that y'all had on your study guide. The other place is Wounded Knee. Wounded Knee was the last place that they had their last stance. And they were obliterated by the military. What they want is they want return of their ancestral lands. They also want to be in charge of the Indian Bureau of Affairs. There's no Indians on the Indian Bureau of Affairs. You would figure they would be on there, right? And so what they will do is they will take over these places. And there will be skirmishes. And the government will return land to them. And they will also give them some leadership roles in the Department of Indian and Bureau of Affairs. So our next group, women. These are the people who are going to make the most strides in the civil rights movement. Because when colleges and employers look at doing affirmative action, they could choose from Hispanics, they could choose from blacks, or they could choose from women. And who are they going to choose? Women. And so women are going to make the greatest strides. And one of the things that we're going to see is they're going to be hired a lot. They're going to be allowed into college. But the Equal Rights Amendment is one of the things that they want to champion, which is them being able to be paid the same as men. Are women paid the same as men today? For every $1 a man makes, a woman makes about 60 cents. Back then it was per every $1 a woman made 40 cents. And we're going to see one of the things that they do get rights to is Roe versus Wade. The other thing that comes out is Title IX. Did y'all know that Waxahachie had a lawsuit about Title IX against it at the old high school? Were the women's facilities equal to the men's facilities? No. And this lawsuit came out and they said, look, please do not sue at this time because we're creating this new facility that will create equality between men's sports and female sports. But Waxahachie, if y'all look back at the facilities at the old high school, were they equal? They were nowhere near. And that's a violation of Title IX. So here are just some women protesters. And y'all know the woman who was against DRA. What was her name? Phyllis Schlafly, which we'll look at a video in a second about her. Okay, now we're going to look at foreign stuff. Okay, the Cold War, our philosophy was allow communism to spread or contain communism. Contain it. But Richard Nixon is going to realize something. We have not been trading with Russia. We have not been trading with China. And are they very powerful nations? And if we were to possibly trade with them, could our economy be doing better? So him and his Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, are going to negotiate a new policy. They're going to move away from containment to this idea of real politics. Deal with nations that are powerful. And this is going to introduce a new era of de-escalation, détente, where our Cold War tensions will decline. And he feels that if we start talking to China and we start talking to Russia, that we could possibly end the war in Vietnam. And so the U.S. will start talking to China first. And I know you've probably seen Forrest Gump, right? Most of us in this. And we know Forrest Gump goes to China in the ping pong delegation. That is a real thing. And he says, I had communism and democracy were coming together. And he said, I had peace in my hands. And it's because we're going to do these cultural exchanges in hopes to ease peace. And so we had not recognized China as the true nation in the UN. Do y'all remember what nation we recognized as China? Taiwan. And we are going to see Nixon will actually for a whole year study Chinese culture. Do you know there's a certain way to bow according to class? If you are a lower class, you bow lower than the person who's above the upper class. He learns things in Chinese that he doesn't want to disrespect. And so we send diplomatic people such as Forrest Gump and other delegations to China. And we're hoping that they will be a wedge to help us negotiate with the USSR and negotiate the end of the Vietnam War. Because we're talking to China, this will open up the way for the U.S. to talk to the Soviet Union. And this will lead to the negotiation of SALT, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. And what it does, we limit intercontinental ballistic missiles. Do y'all remember what event that we had ICBMs in both countries that we were about to go to nuclear war? Cuban Missile Crisis, but we de-escalated it with the hotline and the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. This is another de-escalation where we're limiting the intercontinental ballistic missiles between our countries, warheads, and nuclear subs. And the Soviet Union's agreeing to this because they realize they've been spending all of this money on this stuff. Have they economically advanced their country for their consumers? And so they agreed to the SALT agreement because this will allow them to focus on consumer items, and it also leads to weak deals with the U.S. And then the economy's been going well, not so well, right? But this was one of our questions on our study guide. What is the irony in the election of 1972? Nixon wins it all, but he was trying to cheat to win. Did he need to cheat? No, he wins nearly every single place except one place, Massachusetts. Okay? And we're going to read about why